also something we like to. So I'll restart my welcome. Welcome. If you are joining us today, you're here with Women's Affordable Housing Network, and we are Network, National Equity Together Takes Work. I'm Millie Hurt. I'm National Vice President. For those of you just joining, or you already heard my spiel, please put in the chat your name, where you're coming from, and maybe why you're here today, because that is really interesting. This rounds out our 8th and final session. A year and a half, I think we've been doing this. I know over a year for sure. Because we were on my birthday. This was how I was celebrating my birthday last year. So I just want to thank you all. For those that have been following along. This has been a journey, a learning journey, a little bit cathartic at times, I hope. And as was said earlier, we couldn't have done this without Sarah Driver, our consultant, who has really helped us, navigate what can be like touchy topics, I think, and, think about data-driven, real, executable, like paths forward. I was really thinking about network and coming into this last session, and I know that it's hard to be the squeaky wheel sometimes. I know that we feel like, we just want to kind of beat down. We're tired. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I get tired. You look at what's going on in the world, we know it's craziness. But what can we control? What can we change? Where do we, know better, do better, be the change that we were seeking. We are the change, right? I'm butchering all of those quotes horribly, but I also saw another saying, and I can't give it credit because I forget who said it, but they're not coming to save us. They're not coming to save us. We have got to be the ones, and I really hope that that is the takeaway. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah. And again, Sarah, thank you. We wouldn't be where we're at today without your guidance. So take it away, my dear.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Millie. Thank you so much, Ashley. Thanks for all of you being here today. This is amazing that it's our 8th and last one. We have covered so much ground, and you all are amazing people doing amazing things. And it's an amazing organization doing amazing things. And I'm excited to see the heights that you all go to and the new things that you do in your corners and then more broadly across the industry. So we are, of course, talking about unbiasing our workplaces today. Let me screen share. Here we go. Okay, perfect. All right. So I know there's a couple people who are jumping on for the first time today, so I wanted to introduce myself a little bit. I run Driver Consulting, and I am passionate about particularly the work that we're talking about today. How do we get into the nitty-gritty of our workplaces? I conduct assessments and we do surveys and everything, looking at how can we make things more fair. And I focus on gender equality, but the work we do makes things more fair for everyone. And it's so much fun to work on. And so if your company would be interested in the assessment, please let me know. Also, look me up on LinkedIn. I love connecting with all of you over there too. I think Farah is still working to get the CPEs up and running, so we may skip on that for now, but I wanted to just talk for a second about what we're going to be covering today, where we're going. We know that, we talked about in session 3 way back that we have biases that we bring with us. I think we're all aware of that. And we've understood over the last several years kind of the layers and the impacts that that has. What we know is that it doesn't work to just try to be less biased. Our brains don't work that way. And so we need to be putting in place changes and tactics that help us to minimize the amount of subjectivity and maximize the amount of objectivity across our companies and throughout all the different policies and processes that we have in place. Okay. So as we go along, of course, feel free to raise questions, throw them in the chat. We love seeing questions and being very interactive here. So please don't hesitate to throw something in, and we'll definitely be stopping periodically to go through and see what's hitting as we go along. Okay. So I will circle back to the first CPE question. And when Farah's on, she can kind of explain how that all works. But the problem that we're trying to solve today is that workplaces are not naturally fair spaces. That is because humans are not naturally fair people, decision makers. So we know from tons of research over many decades that we as humans give preference and make decisions based on two big factors when it comes to kind of personnel and other people. We share information and resources with people who are like us, and so come from similar backgrounds, look like us, talk like us, etc. And then we make decisions based on the stereotypes that we have about who would fit in a particular role. Okay, so a positive, an example of positive bias, although it's not positive, so that's a misnomer, but an example of this that we will see is you can have a stereotype of a CEO being a taller man. Okay, so just based on movies, things we've seen in media, all those things that come together to build our stereotypes. And indeed, when we look at average CEO height, it is higher than the average population, which of course, height is not correlated to leadership capacity or ability. But it's just because we slot particular people in for particular types of roles in our brains. Okay. And then of course, on the negative side, we know that both men and women have these kind of stereotypes against women advancing into leadership positions. Even if cognitively we say we believe women can be equally effective leaders, we just don't make decisions that way because of our, all the unconscious bias, subconscious things that are in there. So it's an uphill battle. And so as we said, trying to not have biases doesn't work. And so we need to be making changes in how we organize our workplaces. The kind of go-to thing that people have done in the past several years as this has come to prominence is to try anti-bias trainings. And I don't know if a lot of you have probably been in some anti-bias trainings. What we've learned from the research is that anti-bias trainings make biases worse in us. And I'm so curious if you can drop in the chat and just say if that's something that is on your radar, because it's really well established in the research, but companies are still doing it. So I have a feeling that research has not become popularized enough, and I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Sarah, I was just going to ask, why is that, or why do they think that is?
Okay, there's three things. Number one, it can introduce biases that we did not even know were a thing. And then our brains start to think about, it's like, don't think about the elephant kind of a thing. Like you might have bias against this type of person being this, and you're like, oh no, I didn't, but I guess, maybe, so it introduces them. Number two is it can kind of activate them. And like, oh yeah, I guess that was back there in my brain, but now we're talking about it. And again, it's like just focusing on these ideas instead of what is really true, just kind of activates or then reinforces. So those biases that we even knew we had, we know that how we feel around certain types of people, or how we react when, we see someone with a bunch of tattoos, or, whatever the stereotype may be related to. And so the data is really compelling that there can be very, very well designed anti-bias trainings that do not do this, but it's rare. And so go ahead.
I was going to ask, then how does boosting objectivity differ from like an anti-bias training?
I'm so glad you asked.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Exactly. So what we need to be doing instead is realizing, okay, we can't just make our own biases go away by talking about them. We can't make them go away by just trying, as we said, to not have them play in. We need to have policies and practices that are designed around kind of squeezing out any space for bias. Okay, so our biases, we can work on those. We can read new stories. We can meet new people. That is a work in progress. It's very important work. But in the meantime, squeezing out the subjectivity levels and minimizing those so that we're focused on the outcomes, the performance, the results that we need in our company for it to advance and grow. Does that make sense? Okay.
It looks like some of the folks are in the chat just saying, how many of us are still taking these trainings? And I said in my in a prior role, I had actually taken some of this sort of training, and I know my husband has taken this training more recently. He works for the state, and so it's out there, I think.
Yes. And so kind of what people are talking about now is, okay, we tried some things, it was, a little bit surface level. And so now we're talking about DEI 2.0. And this is the work that we have been talking about all along. How do we go deep, get practical into the nitty-gritty of actually changing how we do business? And a lot of them are just small tweaks, and we'll talk about all the details of it. But small tweaks that we can make, but substantive changes to how we do things. So again, we're shifting the balance so that we're not allowing a lot of space for our biases to run the day. Okay. Okay, we have another CPE question up here. We'll have to, Millie, kind of work out how we want to do that. But I'll let you guys handle that. If you are here and hoping for a CPE, let us know, and we'll try to kind of work that out somehow. Okay. The best example that I absolutely love of how we do this work is an orchestra. Okay. It gives like this, for me, a really clear picture of one little change that can make a huge difference, and like just in massive ways, because of it just exemplifies this principle so well. Okay. So at one point, orchestras were all male. I did not know this, but I was giving this example in another training, and someone was there who was a musician, and they gave me that background, like, oh, it's not just that it was biased, but females were not allowed. And so they've had a lot of catching up to do, which I think a lot of our industries can relate to. But they had this feeling, okay, only men are good enough. And when we run auditions and people are trying out, It's just the men that reach the level of quality. And so, maybe we have a pipeline problem and we're going to start doing some programs in elementary schools. We can all relate to things like that too. Someone stepped up and said, let's try this. Let's have our auditions run behind a curtain. So we can't see who it is, what they look like. Now, if I was an evaluator, I know 100% I would say, not necessary. I am not basing my decision on how people look. I'm basing it completely on what I'm hearing. What they found, however, was that when that happened, when they truly were evaluating just based on what they heard, the results were dramatic. The number of female musicians that were accepted shot up, and very soon they were at a 40% 60 split, which is right in that range of, above 30% minimum, working toward 50%. So this is exactly the kind of thing that we're talking about, okay? We want to be taking away any information that is superfluous so that we can make decisions based on the core competencies that we know is needed for success in the company, in the role. Okay. So I couldn't find how are we going to do this in our companies? Okay. As always, we want to start with the why. We want to get people on board. Millie, as you said, this can be a hard thing to advocate for internally. But when we start by kind of all getting ourselves on the same side of the table, we're working toward the growth and success of our company. That can help. So talking about the business case for gender equality, which is really strong, really compelling, and then the ways that biases are holding us back and causing us to leave money on the table. Okay, letting people know this is about growing, expanding so that there's more for everyone. Okay. The second piece is we need to figure out where our problem areas are. Okay, so when it comes to our own individual companies or our own individual teams, some of us here are leaders over whole companies. Some of us have management within our own teams. Some of us are going to be advocating from below. This can be relevant for wherever you are on the org chart. Okay. For those who are in higher levels of leadership, do an assessment to look at where are we losing people? Okay, so for some, it's in employee evaluations. We have male evaluations. We ran the numbers and we realized they're getting evaluated slightly higher, and that's impacting pay and promotions and bonuses and all of that. So what can we do to make our evaluation process more objective and minimize the levels of subjectivity there? For others of us, it'll be we're not losing them again along the pipeline. We aren't getting them to begin with. So what can we do in the hiring process to maximize objectivity, minimize subjectivity? But if you can pinpoint along the way, here's where we're actually good up to this point, and then it falls apart. There are best practices you can put in place at that point that can help be a quick win to kind of smooth that path for everyone to advance and do their best work. Okay. The third thing then is to just find what the best practices are, which we'll go through many of those in a couple minutes. But looking at where's the subjectivity getting in, which we'll talk about, and how can we make it, and these are going to be simple, free things, y'all, that we can do to make things more fair for everyone. And then really doing the work to make sure that it's happening all across the organization, make sure that it's valued, that it's incentivized, that it's measured, that people know that this is a serious value because we're putting it into our dashboards, our KPIs. We're putting incentives around it for our employee evaluations, for our leadership evaluations. And, however it is in our company that we incentivize things, this is in that bucket.
I think
Okay.
it's Sarah, I think
Yeah.
for me, this comes across as sort of a multi-pronged thing because circular vicious cycle-y type thing,
Okay.
because women in so many cases take on the brunt of family and the workload. And that's kind of where that bias comes. It's like, oh, she's going to have a baby, or she's, has to take off more time. And it's like, how do you, so I feel like sort of some of this, but we're working on that with network as well. And how can we, have, fair, equal parental leave? We can maybe have more flexible, benefits for people in general. So I'm tossing that out there, but do you have any like response to any of that?
Yeah, it's absolutely multi-pronged. So we have done all these sessions of, we need to target the confidence gap. We need to work on work-life balance policies where we have the same level of parental leave. So there is not even that consideration. It all is really important. This is a good starting place for some of this because it is, even without, sometimes, like, for example, parental leave, that can be expensive and it's worth doing because it really matters. This is a lot of these tweaks are much easier and cheaper, and they will have a good, amount of, some of this stuff is really transformational, some of these small tweaks. And it can kind of be a building block for getting to things like equal parental leave, which there can be some, more pushback and more kind of cost implication and that kind of thing.
Yeah, if people recognize their bias towards women and parental leave, then that's a good starting point. And we just had Farah join us. So not to put her on the spot a little bit since she's just now joining. But Farah, welcome. Thank you so much. Just so for those that are new or have, not joined us before, Tidwell Group actually sponsors CPE credit for these sessions. And so, Farah, are you able to take it away real quick?
Yes, thank you so much. I'm going to keep my camera off to help the internet. Sorry for my technical troubles today, but I am unlocking all of the poll questions, and when I can find the chat box, I will post that in the chat box for you guys to follow the link.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And nobody likes technical difficulties, but we all face them. So you're doing great.
Yes,
and thank
absolutely.
you again. Thank you to Tidwell Group.
Thanks, guys.
Let me go to the next slide. So you can see the link here while Farah's getting it up, and then there's a QR code. And Farah, would it be best at this point? This is the third question. Should we go ahead and do the first, second, and third now, or kind of space them out differently? What do you prefer?
Sure. I've got each of them unlocked. So we can, the first one is, oh, I still haven't posted that in the screen, but I think you guys have the link on the screen. The first question is, have you been part of a workplace sponsored anti-bias training? And you've got just a couple of options for that question. I know personally I haven't, but the chat box now has the link. Oh, thank you so much. The second question to consider is, has your company or manager talked about taking action together to minimize the impact of bias? And your answer options are yes, my company and my manager, just my company, just my manager, or no, which is totally fine. And so as these, yeah, so with this, software, you just have to go to this, you follow this link and you sign in, you'll put your email, and that way, when you give us your email, it gives us a way to send you your certificate for the continued education credits. And by answering just, we do a guideline of 3 polling questions per 50 minutes of training. And so since this is a 60-minute training, we're giving you 4 questions all together. And so I'm just explaining this to you guys a little bit as we give our friends the opportunity to answer these poll questions that have been posted at the link in the chat box. It's a web-based software called Conference.io, and you can just open the browser on your computer, on your smart device. And it'll be super simple. You don't have to get anything right. You just have to show that you're following along in order for us to give you the credit for the, the certificates. You just have to check box a couple of things so that we know you're following along. And of course, if you have any other questions, there is a Q&A section down there, and I can filter that through to Sarah. And of course, there's the chat function on the Zoom as well. But
Thank you, Vera. So we have 3 poll questions that are already available, and we'll have a final one towards the end. Is that what you're?
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so the third question is, and if you're not doing this for CPs and you want to answer in the chat, that's great too. How much better would you feel about your workplace if things were more fair and transparent? Okay, so this can be a big, for companies, it's not only who you have in the door, but how engaged they are. And when things are more fair and transparent, we know that employee engagement tends to go up. I mean, it does go up, but if your workplace you feel is already pretty fair and transparent, then it may not have as big of an impact on companies where it's, just you can see the biases around you or the spaces for bias. Anyone have anything to share in the chat on that topic?
I think I just have like a general question. I've personally witnessed some pretty interesting, what I would say, bias towards women in leadership positions. And I wonder if others have, experienced similar things. It looks like Stephanie was just sharing that I feel like she says it feels like it impacts all aspects of our work. And we've had recent conversations. Everyone is impacted positively or negatively. And I think that's really true, because when you see like women, especially, I guess that's what we're geared towards here, but any kind of bias, it just sort of unabashedly like out in the open. And then nobody says a word about it. And the rest of the leadership just like turns, just will not respond to what happened or explain it or anything. Then it really brews a special sort of
100%.
resentment or just underlying fear, because you may watch others like yourself just kind of go through the ringer. So I don't know if you have a response to that, but it's tough stuff.
It really is. And I think another piece that we see is it undermines, kind of building on what Stephanie said about it impacts us positively and negatively. Even people who would be considered to benefit from the biases, it undermines their work, because there are question marks like, well, is this person, if it's not transparent, if it's not a transparent process, and if people have questions about how biased it is, then there's just always question marks lingering around why did that person get that job, or why is that person getting that assignment, or um, it seems like they're treated differently. And so it, even for the people who are promoted, but then the stress, of kind of those questions and feeling like they have to prove them, just it's toxic on so many levels, to your point, Millie. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, let's dive in.
Real quick, we had a question come in.
Okay.
What do you do when you have a female team leader supervisor who doesn't promote other female coworkers' growth and moving up in the organization?
Mm.
Women against women. What the heck? Not cool, man. Um, what should we do?
That's hard. So, a lot of times women like that will have come up in a context where it was like, there's only room for one woman at the table.
Only so much pie to go around.
Yes. Yes. And so when we understand the business case that we need a critical mass of both men and women at the table in order for us to really be accessing the benefits of gender equality and the complementarity of the different perspectives and experiences and backgrounds that we are bringing to the table, that can help if we understand the business case and the mechanisms. But sometimes it's a mentality, and that is where it comes back to holding people accountable. Okay, so if you have a leader, female or male, where we can track the data over time and see females under this person are not getting promoted, they're not getting the challenge assignments, their employee evaluations are harsher, and they tend to be scored lower relative to their male colleagues. This is something that needs to be flagged for intervention. And, however the incentives work out, or, sticks and carrots, whether that person is male or female, part of what we need to be doing is having those trackings in place so that we can flag, okay, we've got a problem situation over here. Here's, we can start to have those conversations. What's going on here? Do you feel like, and then, whatever comes out of that conversation, we want to be starting with capacity building. But then it needs to get to the point eventually, if it doesn't change, where you can't be a leader in this organization if you're not going to be prioritizing the results and productivity outcomes that we need in order to grow.
So, but real quick, how, if you weren't in a position, a leadership position, or had any power or whatever, I mean, you can't go to your supervisor because she's obviously not on your team. Do you go to HR? Do you go to the head honcho? Like, what do you think best steps are for that?
Honestly, in some situations, it's best to leave.
Okay.
And go find another, friendlier place. If you do want to try to work toward change, approaching it from this kind of neutral, like, are we making sure that in this organization, this company as a whole, we are making sure that women and men are being promoted? Is that something that we're tracking? Kind of encouraging those mechanisms that would flag your particular boss, but making it kind of neutral so that it is just, making the business case, talking about why we need to, and then that can kind of flag that person as part of a larger project, because then you're putting these kind of advocating for putting these systemic solutions in place that can address this. It's probably not just happening with one person. But it definitely gets to a point where, and I'm sure several of us on here have experienced this, where, maybe we've raised some things, it hasn't been, it's not open to conversation. Just
Not
go
well
where you're
received.
wanted. Yes. Go where you're wanted, go where you can grow. life is too short.
Bake another pie per Cindy.
Yes,
I love
exactly.
it.
Exactly.
Bake your own pie. Um, that's a hard thing. I know personally, I really was in a, you know, in a role and when you believe in what you're doing, to feel like you need to like jump ship because you're not personally supported is one of the hardest things, because I think as women, we get really passionate about what we're doing and we care about the people that we serve. And yet, you know, when we're being discriminated against or when we're in a toxic situation, we just kind of take it and take it and take it and take it. Am I the only one? And then you're just like, wait a second, like what is going on? This is
Yeah.
gone, you know.
And
But okay, fine.
what we know from research is that we often don't realize that it's happening because of these kind of larger factors, and we just think, oh, this person doesn't like me. And so there's all this internalization that we do of other people's bad behavior, right? I have been in that position where I'm so committed to the mission of the group I'm working with, and I wish I would have left 5 years ago. Looking back now, as on my career, it was, I mean, the levels of toxicity on the negative side, but then the lack of the mentoring and growth and all the coaching that I could have been getting at a more healthy company, that stuff really matters. So as young professionals, you know, there is a place for advocacy, and there is also a place for just finding greener pastures.
Thank you for saying that.
Yes.
Sometimes people need to hear that. We feel like we've got to stay forever because, you know,
Yeah.
and then you get the golden handcuffs and it's over. But
Yes. Yes.
thank you.
Yes. Yes. So there, I don't know your first name. I'm sorry, L. I can't tell if it's L or I, but Jarvis saying she's been in that situation just recently of was, you know, just hitting this you know, cap, and now she's at a place where like it sounds like completely different work environment. And so I don't know if you want to speak to that, but what you shared is already really powerful. Thank you. All right, let's jump into some of what we can be doing when we are in those positions where, okay, I have a team, I'm part of HR, I have some influence on HR, I have some influence on management. What are those things that we can be doing, and what can we be looking for, as Stephanie was saying earlier, when we're in a position to be choosing an employer? What are some things that we can be looking for in the hiring process, asking about in the interview process? What are the practices that you're putting into place? How can I recognize a company that's taking this seriously and is not just pinkwashing or offering lip service, right? So on both levels there, when you're hiring, what we know is that when we don't have, and this can apply also to promotions evaluations, when we don't have clear criteria, clear rubrics, clear selection metrics in place, our process can get really fuzzy. And when our processes are fuzzy and like, just pick who you think will be the best one, our biases go crazy. Okay, we end up picking people based on our stereotypes, based on people, you know, who we feel most comfortable with because they're most like us. We go with our first impressions, all of which are just massively impacted by our biases. But when we get clear on just a few simple selection criteria, some clarity in our you know, written rubrics that we're using, those biases can disappear, and the impacts of the biases. I mean, let me restate, make sure that's clear. The biases don't disappear, the impacts of the biases disappear. Okay, there's these few little tweaks that we're going to go through and just right now, that really are magical. Okay, so I love how Google rework, y'all. Google had this amazing, the company had this amazing set of unbiasing practices that they had on a website called Rework. I have always recommended it in my presentations. In the last 2 weeks, that website is gone and it's now in Japanese. And I'm so sad that I cannot recommend it to you unless you speak Japanese, and I don't know what's on there.
Maybe we can get ChatGPT to change it for us. Send it over. I'll see what I can do.
Perfect. Because it was just such a wealth of resources, and it's just all there in one place. But anyways, their quote was, applying structure to hiring, as an example, does not need to be hard. Write down the minimum qualifications needed to do the job, share them with all the interviewers, and ensure everyone is asking the same questions to assess those qualifications, right? So it's simple stuff, but we just need to make sure that we're actually doing it and that it's being done in a systematic way across our company, and then that it's kind of institutionalized so that it continues on in the future and we don't have to keep recreating the wheel. Okay. So number one, which we just, this quote just talked to, structured interviews, same questions and methods for applicants for the same job. It's not rocket science. It's pretty basic, but we don't always do that. And when we do, it has a huge impact, makes a huge difference. Culture fit. Okay. We've seen that on hiring rubrics. There was a company I worked with. We did an assessment. We went through their hiring criteria and culture fit was right there. So I said, tell me more about that. They were like, well, we, it's just who we think will fit. Okay. Well, that again, when it's left wide open, it gets fuzzy and the door is wide open for our biases. But they did have particular things that they wanted people to be looking for, but it just wasn't explicit. So we went through the process of saying, we're looking for someone who's entrepreneurial, someone who's flexible, whatever those criteria are, what exactly is it that will make them a culture fit? And if there are things on your culture fit list that are not related to success in the job or in the company, then just making sure that they're not part of the criteria. And then having as many once people are hired, making sure that when it comes to performance evaluations, that we have as many objective criteria as possible that we are evaluating people on. Okay. This links up with the confidence gap. It links up with biases. But when we are just basing what we can remember or what we think about what happened during the last quarter, the last year with this employee, it gets very skewed and our biases again have a heyday. Okay. So again, it's these simple things. Nothing I have talked about on this slide costs 1 cent. It's just a matter of taking the time to go through, putting the policies in place, shifting, clarifying, and then you've done a huge step forward towards gender equality and all kinds of different equality. So making things more fair doesn't just help women, of course. It helps everyone who doesn't match the kind of stereotype of whatever success has tended to look like within your company. Okay. Okay, so
I just use ChatGPT to ask it to give me unbiased interview questions. So for those of you who aren't using ChatGPT, just know that it does have its own bias because it's based on human
yes.
information. But it's a great resource for, maybe even just running your own questions through it and saying, are these, maybe change these to take out any bias you may see. I don't know. You might find ways to utilize it to review some of this stuff, or you could hire a consultant like Sarah Driver to help you. recognize bias in your hiring process, of course. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, there's so many resources out there. Catalyst, on the last slide of the presentation, I have a list of websites where there's a lot of best practices. And if you don't have time to sort through and wade through all that, I would, of course, be happy to come in and do an assessment. I love, love, love doing this because, I mean, it's just a big difference that you can make, and it doesn't take that long, and it's really powerful. Okay, the other set of things I want to talk about for unbiasing, there's a the piece of this that is, we've talked about, like, having that structure, having the criteria, having clarity, maximizing objectivity in that way. Another set of ways to do that is looking at who is involved and what information is involved. So, number one, bringing in a diversity of people into the decision-making process. Okay. We know that multi-person decision-making teams, when it comes to hiring or promotions, tend to be more objective than just one person. Okay, so depending on the size of your company, it may not be possible to have a big team of people doing the hiring all the way along, but at least at the final stages, if you can have mixed gender teams, ideally, that can just kind of account for, oh, we're considering that factor, but that doesn't need to be a factor, or, that can just bring in different perspectives. That's really helpful. Anonymizing as much as possible in the particular hiring process. So names, pictures, anything related to, kind of like stereotypical things, like when people see a PTA involvement listed on a woman's resume, they will kind of fall into that assumption, like Millie talked about, of like, oh, well, she's probably going to be not as available or not as committed, when that's absolutely has nothing to do with it. When we can remove, and there's really good masking software that does this, removing all of that information so that we are just considering the relevant information, the experience, the skills, the qualifications of the person. And then, of course, when they come for the interview, you find out more, but you have that initial objectivity screen that helps with that. We touched on this last month, but every single personnel decision that is made at your company should be justified in writing. There's something about the process of writing things down that can kind of uncover some of the gaps or the assumptions and crystallize it, right? And so you can see when you're writing it on paper, oh, there actually isn't a reason to pick this person over this person based on their qualifications. Maybe I need to go back and take another look. That is again, so simple. It takes, maybe 10 minutes at the most if it's a very involved evaluation. That can make a huge difference in eliminating those impacts of bias. Okay. This should be across all companies, all personnel decisions. Okay.
And this is not only just in the actual interview phase, but isn't there software that actually will like look at the job description and make sure it's not biased to begin with, skewed towards? So another thing to consider is you may even just be writing a job description that already, eliminates a lot of candidates, because of our confidence gap and some other things. But
yes, it can be the types of criteria that we include. It can be the types of phrases that we use that would turn off one particular demographic and draw in another type of demographic. Huge. That's another great example of an unbiasing process. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We have time for our next CPE question. And while we're doing that, the question is, does your company, or do you, if you're a manager, use clear rubrics for hiring, performance reviews, and promotion decisions? So for those of you who are not doing CPE, if you want to throw any of your thoughts in the chat, we would love to hear them. Lori Jarvis is the one who I didn't know if it was an L or an I. And so thank you for sharing. And I love what you say here, Lori. She says, for so long, I thought I was not skilled enough for this. And I assume for the promotions that she was asking for before at her old company. Now I know it had nothing to do with my skill or experience. So just getting out of those toxic environments. And I mean, it just sounds like you're taking flight, Lori. Congratulations on taking that jump. Because once you're beat down in that kind of thing, you think like, oh, I can't succeed anywhere else. So it just becomes such a vicious cycle, and you broke free. Well done. That's awesome. Okay. Go ahead.
I was just going to say the answers looks like 67% said no, and one person said, I'm not sure to answer.
Okay. So that's 0 yeses. So
we didn't have a lot of votes, but that, you know.
Yeah. So that's, these are simple things that we can be doing. And again, it doesn't just impact who we hire and who we, promote, but how they're perceived and the confidence level that they have, knowing this was a rigorous, transparent process. And here I am, I have this role, and let's go. It really makes a big difference in employee engagement, teamwork, all of those different factors. Like Stephanie said, it impacts just the whole experience in the workplace. Okay, so this is our last session. And I wanted to wrap up just saying, this is all about keeping the focus on skills and outcomes so that we're leveling the playing field as much as possible and keeping results and performance and the way that we're doing our work, the outcomes we're having at the forefront. Okay, these are not big, expensive things to do. The work of equity takes a lot of small conversations that we can all be having, and really, like, we don't have to come in like a wrecking ball, like we've talked about, like just asking the question, or like wondering out loud, like, would this be worth having a conversation about as a team? Or I read this the other day and it made me so curious about what we could do here. Really just
Or I joined the network session, and
yes, exactly.
I got continuing education credit, and they talked about this. I love it. You don't have to be a wrecking ball like me, although I do encourage that.
We need all kinds.
Yeah, you can be the small squeaky wheel that,
Yeah. And it's these small policy tweaks that as managers and presidents and leaders, we can be making sure, okay, do we have those best practices in place? Can we demonstrate that? How are we benchmarking ourselves against best practice? Putting all those things in place. This helps you avoid all the flashy, expensive, performative stuff that falls flat in the end anyways, and people recognize it for what it is. This gives you a chance to demonstrate we are serious about this. We take our work very seriously. We want results to be what we're evaluating. It really gives you a chance to show yourself as an industry leader. There's so many good things that come out of doing this boring work of policy tweaks, and sometimes the intimidating work of having those conversations and kicking those off. But I am so appreciative of all the amazing conversations we have had. It has been phenomenal. You all are so engaged. You are out there all over the country doing amazing things in this industry. And then you have this space in WAN where we can all come together and realize we're not alone in this topic. We can learn from each other's experience. It's phenomenal. So I am so grateful to have been a part of this, and I am cheering you on in all of your next steps.
Thank you, Sarah. We are cheering you on as well. So highly recommend 6 out of 5 stars for Sarah Driver. And
Thank you.
we couldn't, I'm a better person because I met you and I've been on this journey with you. And I think we all can say this has been, like a little part therapy, part learning, but like really tangible things that we can take back to our workplaces, back to our friends, our family, have these, small conversations, like Sarah said. But it's us. We're going to have to be the change. And so this kind of wraps up our final session. Again, if you guys could all thank Sarah for everything, we really appreciate it. But we are going to continue network, so do not worry. We are on a path. We're kind of in a strategic planning session right now where, what do we do next? So you guys might receive a survey from me asking, are these topics, especially for folks that are maybe joining us like later on and you haven't been in the other sessions, we're probably going to be, regurgitating some of this because, we're going to get new ideas. There's always new data coming out. There are, ways and there's successes that we need to celebrate. But bringing our industry, creating sort of a gold standard in all of this is the goal. So I like to say, like, I put the tagline, like, be part of the network, be part of the solution. And I take that really seriously. So I need all of you. I need your ideas. I need, for you to help promote network in your organizations, but more to come because we do want to do some research. We do want to sort of be the entity in this industry that helps, like, not only identify where the needle is, but move the needle. And so again, thank you for showing up all of these times, following along. It's been a journey for sure. And I'm not sure if Ashley, you wanted to say anything else. I know we're like a minute over.
I just think this series was awesome, and I'm glad and so grateful, Sarah, to you for all the knowledge you shared, because sometimes, like you said today, a small little conversation can impact and have an impact, but impact so many people. And I like your gentle delivery, because I do think not everyone in the world is ready for diversity inclusion. Not everyone, some people have stated they're tired by it. So I think sometimes having different ways to approach this subject, wrecking ball / Millie's squeaky wheel, like she likes to call it, / gentle approach or questioning. I read this article. I think it's nice to have different approaches where everyone has a comfort level that they can bring it up and it's not met with resistance or pushback immediately. So thank you all for everything. Thank you, Sarah.
Yes. Awesome, Ashley. Thank you. Well, we're going to go. So we'll stay tuned, follow us on LinkedIn, join, make sure you're on the national join list as well. So you're getting all that information. We try not to blow you up. But as you can see, we try to put together really great programming for all of you. So anyway, go out, be wonderful, and see you all soon. Take care.